But I very much look at the world differently than probably most. I was raised by a loving mother and father. I'm an only child. My mother was, I'm gonna try and say not so many aunts too. I just caught myself saying about 50 in a row. My mother was a 2-time cancer survivor, and her mother was a 3-time cancer survivor. So when you're growing up with somebody like that, and you go through those challenges with somebody being little all the way to being an adult, and you watch them fight and win those battles, it makes you look at the world differently and be very appreciative of every day. So I went to Oklahoma State and graduated with a bachelor's degree in speech pathology and audiology. Clearly I'm not doing that now, which is kind of a funny story. So when I wanted to go to get my master's, which is what you have to have to be able to be a speech pathologist, when I had to have my letter of recommendation, there was a professor at Oklahoma State that refused to write it for me. She said, I know that you are really sweet and you get what we do, but I just don't know if you're smart enough. Oh, yeah. And by her not writing my letter of recommendation, I couldn't get a master's degree, which really sucked. And what she didn't know is that my mother was a dean at college. My mom was self-made. She grew up in Stratford, Oklahoma, which is a little town outside of Pauls Valley. See a bunch of you nodding. And she was very poor, and she learned how to be a woman in a man's world. She started out at the college TCC, back then it was called Tulsa Junior College in Tulsa. It had one campus, and she was a school nurse, wore the little white hat, the white dress, the white SAS shoes. No offense if anyone's wearing SAS shoes here today. I know they are very comfortable, but they are not pretty. But I have reached that age where I do like comfy shoes over pretty, but these I work all because I thought they were cute. Anyway, so my mom started out as a school nurse in 1970, and I was born in 74. And when she had worked there, I don't know, several years, they decided they were going to open a second campus. And she couldn't be the school nurse anymore for both. So she moved her way up and became the handicap and safety director, which means it was back in the 80s when they were doing the ADA compliant, finally doing wheelchair access and, you know, elevators and doorways wide enough. And so she did that for both of the campuses. And then she worked her way up to helping them start their nursing, dental hygiene, PT, OT stuff, and the medical programs that they have now. So I grew up with a mother who was very like, this is what the world needs, this is what we're gonna do, and this is how I'm gonna do it. So I had that kind of mentor just showing me like, you know, I don't care if you don't feel good, you have stuff to do today, or don't tell me no. So I love that about my mom. She's been gone for 14 years now, but I will tell you that she's left a legacy, because when I meet people from TCC to this day, people will say, oh my God, you're Bobby Woodward's daughter. I love that woman. She was so funny. She would walk in her Talbot's power suit and everyone was intimidated. And she'd tell a funny joke that was not appropriate and we would all laugh. So I kind of get my sense of humor from her. Anyways, I said again. Maybe I need to go to speaking school. I did it again. It's just a habit. Well, so I went to Oklahoma State, like I said, graduated, and so I pivoted, which that's another word I didn't like coming out of COVID, but it fits. I went to work for an eye surgeon. So the reason I'm telling you kind of my story is because I want you to know that there's challenges amongst success, and for every success there is a challenge that got you where you were going to be. That also makes me who I am. So I worked for an eye surgeon only because I had taken so many anatomy and physiology classes during speech pathology and audiology school, from diaphragm up, that I could tell you every muscle that made your eyes move to your soft palate, your mouth, like all the things. So I went to work for Dr. Ronk, and he had me assist him in eye surgery, and I loved it. But within 6 months of me working for him, he sat me down one day and said, listen, I really like your drive. You are like destined to learn everything, but I can't pay you anymore. And I care about you enough as a person and as a dad to tell you that I don't know what I can do for you unless you go back to medical school and you partner with me and either be the optometrist and I do the surgery, or you just go back to medical school and open your own practice. And by chance, by the grace of God, I went to lunch or dinner the next night with one of my best friends from high school and her older sister that we used to torment. And she happened to be pregnant. She was talking about how heavy she was and miserable and her back was aching. And she said, and I've got to find somebody to replace me at Quick Trip. And I don't know who to ask that would come in and work temporary, no benefits, $10 an hour. And I was kind of sitting there listening to her, and she goes, I mean, would you want to do that? And I said, well, not really. That's a lot less paid than what I'm making now. I get benefits. And she said, well, the only thing I can think of is you can get in there and try really hard, and maybe they'll keep you on. Maybe they'll bring you on full time, and it won't be just a 4-month gig while I'm out on maternity leave. And so I thought about it, and I thought, I'm not going to lose. So I went and interviewed for it. They hired me on the spot. And she said, okay, now that I got in there and I got started, she was there for a month before she left for maternity leave. And she said, I just need you to work hard. And I said, okay. So I showed up the first day of work. This is a true story. And not everybody knows this story. I tell it to some groups. So back then, Chester Cadgio, who was the founder and CEO of Quick Trip, he was still the CEO, and this was in '99. I showed up my first day of work, and it was the old corporate office was 1 story, and it was this big long 1/4 mile long building. And I showed up and I don't know, like 6:45 in the morning. I was supposed to be there at 8. I was so excited. And the receptionist happened to be there. She goes, honey, I don't know why you're here. I can't do anything with you. You don't have a security badge. Like, oh my God. And she rolled her eyes and was just like totally annoyed with me. And I thought it was funny. So I was sitting in the lobby, and then here comes the security guard and said, I'll take you to go get your badge. And we'll just get that done. So when your boss shows up, we can show you to your office. So he takes me down to the mail room, which was also like the shipping and receiving warehouse. And we passed this older gentleman carrying trash cans. And I said, good morning. And he smiled at me sheepishly. And I didn't think anything about it. And I talk to everybody. I will talk. I have fun in the shoebox by myself. I will talk to anybody. And so every morning, I'm also an early bird. So I would show up to work every morning way before everyone else. And I would pass this older gentleman, the janitor, carrying these trash cans, and I would say hi to him every morning, and he would giggle at me. And so I had been there, I don't know, maybe a couple of months, when one day here's the other pivotal part of the story. They had no offices left when they hired me. So they put me in the hallway in a makeshift cubicle next to the copy machine. It was one of those gigantic old school copy machines everyone in the company used to collate, so it was just constantly like going, and I couldn't hardly hear on my phone. So I sat out in the hallway, and everyone was like, oh yeah, you're the copy girl. And I'm like, that's me. And so what I was doing is I was working in the marketing department, and I was what they call traffic coordinator. So if somebody needed a promotion for, say, the Wichita stores, they would call and say, we need hot dogs on a sign for our gas pumps for the Wichita stores for July of this year. And I would go to the graphic artist and say, this is what we need, tell them what to do, and I made sure the jobs were getting done, and then I would get it to the printers. So they just call traffic coordinator. It's a silly thing to just say you're getting things done. So anyways, that's what I did. It was very entry level. So fast forward a couple of months, and that janitor comes walking by. He's not carrying trash cans, and it was early morning, but everyone was at the office working. And behind him was like 5 men in suits walking by, and he was in like khakis and a t-shirt and tennis shoes. And he said, I want you all to meet my friend Lisa. Well, first of all, I didn't know that he knew my name. And because I said hi to him every day, but he never really just would giggle and smile at me and say good morning. And he said, this is my friend Lisa, she's my boss. And I innocently was like, I don't have any direct reports. Like nobody reports to me. I don't know. And he just giggled, and I shook all their hands and thought, I don't know who these people are, and they walked off. And so I'm sure you all know where this is going, right? The everyone's not. So a month or so later, I'm in a meeting one day talking to somebody, and that gentleman walks by, and I said, hey, what is the janitor's name? Because I want to call him by name in the mornings. And they were like, that's Chester Cadjo. And I said, who's that? And they were like, that's the CEO and founder of Quick Trip. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I thought that was a janitor this whole time. So I have a lot of those moments in life where I just talk to everybody and not know who they are. And so anyways, but what that brought was me working in the next to the copy machine and everyone teasing me and everyone knew I was entry level and I didn't care. But they quickly brought me on full time, offered me benefits and bumped my pay to $12 an hour. And I was thrilled and I was like, okay, maybe I've got a career here at Quick Trip. And everyone at QT comes from the stores. So it was a big deal that I got in at the corporate level, even if it was very entry level and I didn't know what would come of it. So I kept working really hard. I would show up every day early, ask lots of questions, try to do the best job that I could. And what no one realized was everyone at the corporate office, all the VPs, all the secretaries, and we all know the secretaries know everything that's going on in the company and all the stuff. And what no one put together, and I didn't put together until after the fact, was everyone came to make copies. So gradually people would talk to me and I would talk to them and ask them what they were doing, what they were working on, and they would ask me questions. And so what I didn't realize is when we moved to the new office where it is now, and it's huge and it's got 600 plus employees, was I got to meet everybody in the company. I got to know how the company functioned. I got to see all the inner workings. And so when people needed things, they started coming to me because I knew where things were. I knew who was the point person and all those types of things. And so that sounds silly, but I look back on that, that was the biggest blessing because I got to know Chester. So every morning I would show up early before everyone. He was always there first time. So one day I finally said to him, why are you always taking out the trash when you get here? We have janitors. And he goes, because my office is locked and I'm capable. And that was a big life lesson to me to think, you know, just because somebody has a job and that's what they're paid to do, doesn't mean you don't help them out, or you don't step in. You know, it doesn't matter who you are. He owns $1 billion corporation. He was taking out his own trash every morning. And that was such an influential thing to me. But what's really funny is fast forward about a year, I am working in the marketing department, and Chet, who is now the CEO of Quick Trip, which is one of his sons, came to me and said, you're single, you don't have kids, help me put on the charity golf tournament this year. So I did. And that morning of the tournament, everything took off great, and there was a foursome that had somebody calling sick. And I played golf, so I was like, I'll jump in and play with them. And I proceeded to play golf with this gentleman, never asked what he did. I assumed he was a vendor, like from Pepsi or something, that was in the golf cart with me, but his name was Bruce. And we had fun. Everyone was drinking, everyone was smoking cigars, and I was 20 something. I was like, why not? I can rebound for this tomorrow and not be hungover. Why not? So we all had a good time. And I never saw that gentleman again. Like I said, I assumed he was one of our vendors that flew into town. And I don't know, a month later, I'm sitting in my little cubicle next to the copy machine, and I answered the phone and he said, hey, do you remember me? This is Bruce from the golf tournament. And I said, oh my gosh, yes, I do. And I said, where do you work again? And he goes, I work at Quick Trip. I was like, sorry. And he said, I'm the vice president of petroleum. I make sure that all the stores have fuel. I'm ever trading and scheduling and all the things. And I'm like, that is awesome. I'm so sorry. I know you were. And anyways, he said, well, we have a job that's open and I want you to apply for it. And I was like, okay. So I obliged his conversation, and then I got off the phone. Well, I never applied for it because I thought, I don't know anything about gas. I don't know anything. So, and I loved what I was doing in the marketing department. It was fun, it was fast, it was stressful, I loved it. So fast forward to a month later, the job was getting ready to close for the job that he posted. And he called me and he said, I've been waiting for your resume. Why have you not applied? I said, I don't know anything. And I'm afraid I just will fail. And he was like, just apply. And I said, okay, so I did. I put a resume together and I applied. So I got an interview. So I walk into this conference room, and it's Chester, who's the CEO, Chet, his son that's going to be taking over, and then Bruce, the vice president of petroleum. And I was intimidated And I was in shorts and a tank top and flip flops, and because at the corporate office at QT back then, everyone would wear shorts and it was no big deal. I think they still can now. But anyways, and I walked in and they said, tell us what you know about gas. And in that moment, I knew I could either try to sound like I knew more than I did and make myself sound better, or I could just be really honest because I had nothing to lose, right? I'm so glad I took the later, because I said, I pull my 92 Susie Rodeo up to the gas pump, take the nozzle out, and stick it in, and I get unleaded. And they laughed just like that. And they said, congratulations, you've got the job. And I go, why? And they said, because we don't know what you don't know, and we want to train somebody to do it the way Quick Trip Boy does it. We could pay somebody hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was like, wait, does it pay that much? Like, no. But they said, we can train you the way we want you to do it in the QT way. And we think we did a personality assessment on you when you hired on, and you have the exact personality we need to plug into that job. So that was a job I didn't see coming. I knew nothing about you. I literally knew nothing except unleaded, mid-grade, premium, and diesel on the gas pump. That's all I knew. And it ended up being my favorite job I've ever had to date. I mean, I love what I do now, but it was my favorite job. And I thrived at it. It was super stressful. I took care of all the fuel for the East and West Coast markets of the entire US. And I loved it. It was just crazy chaotic. So that was another God moment, right? I wasn't expecting that to come. So transitioned over there, was there for many years. And I went to Atlanta to take a bunch of the guys that managed our fuel to a Braves baseball game to say thank you at the tank farm. And that's where I met my husband. He was one of the new employees that they hired. And I'm gonna be really honest, I thought he was a grumpy old man on the phone. And so when I got there to take them all to the baseball game, he was like, you're Lisa? And I'm like, you're Ben. And it was one of those moments, it's a total meet cute from a movie. And so we giggled. We dated long distance for a year, and then he ended up getting transferred. He worked for Magellan, which is based out of Tulsa. And he got transferred to Houston, and so he asked me to marry him, and I gave up my career at QT, which some days I'm like, oh, I should have made him give up his career, and moved to Tulsa. However, I did, and here's another God moment. So I worked really hard. I busted my butt to be in a man's world. Everyone in petroleum, in that oil and gas world, mainly men, and pretty much still are. But I also loved it because I love working with men because they made me stronger, because I felt like I had to fight a little bit harder, or also learn to communicate the way that they do. It made me a little bit more rounded. So another God moment. Sitting at my cubicle, my husband at the time, my boyfriend, and he had asked me to move down to Houston, and I said, let me think about it, because I love my job at QT. I don't know if I want to give up my career. I do love you and I want to marry you, but we need to figure this out. So I thought about it for a couple of days, and I was going to be flying down on Thursday so I could stay for a 4-day weekend and come back. And so on Wednesday, right before I was flying down, that afternoon, I'm at my desk in petroleum, answer the phone, and this gentleman says, hey, this is Tracy Bishop from ConocoPhillips. I know we trade with you every day on the trading floor. We talk every day. You all schedule fuel and barges and stuff with us. I have $100 bet in my head of trading here in Houston that I can't convince you to come down to Houston. I'll double your salary and whatever QT's paying if you will help me win the bet. And I was like, let's talk. So what I talked about, so I did not tell Ben at the time. And he knew I was flying down the next morning. He just stayed for a 4-day weekend. I said, well, funny enough, I'm flying down tomorrow to see my fiance. And he said, send me your plane ticket, I'll reimburse you. We'll interview you tomorrow morning. We'll see what's going on. So I got down there. They didn't interview me. They took me to a Mexican restaurant, brought everybody margaritas, and brought a contract and said, if you'll sign, we'll double your salary, whatever you name. And I was like, am I being punked? You know? And long story short, I agreed. And then when Ben got home from work that day, he walked in and he goes, okay, I'm so excited to see you. And ran in the door, hugged me, kissed me. He goes, okay, so you moving to Houston? I go, yeah. He goes, okay, we need to find you a job. Already done. And he was like, what? And I told him, like, how does this happen? I'm like, I don't know. So anyways, I worked at ConocoPhillips at the world headquarters for 6 years and loved it. And I just built on the skill set that I learned at QT. And I worked with a whole bunch of men on the trade floor. And, you know, I knew I was greener than they were, but I also knew I made them millions. And it was this very reciprocal thing of, I know your stuff, you know my stuff, let's take care of each other and let's make this work. And so when I told them that I was gonna move home back to Tulsa 6 years later, they begged me to stay. But I realized that living in Houston was not for me. My mother had gotten sick. She passed away from pneumonia, not cancer. She got sick and passed away. My dad was very upset. Obviously, my mom passed away the week of their 40th wedding anniversary. And so, and then I found out I was pregnant right after that, so she didn't get to see her only grandchild. But I knew that Houston was not for me. It took me 3 hours a day to commute just to go to work. And that to me is not a life, 15 hours of sitting a week in your car. So I convinced my husband to move to Tulsa. He's from Iowa. And he was like, we're gonna move where? I said, listen, Iowa boy, it ain't that different. let's be clear. So I convinced him to move to Tulsa, but I couldn't find a job. So I called Quick Trip, and Bruce, who is now like the third in command of all of QT, I called him and said, hey, I'm moving back. You said if I was ever gonna move back, you want to bring me back on. And he goes, I waited for you for 6 years. And I finally divvied up your job and hired all these people. And I don't have anything for you, but in 5 years, we have like 7 people retiring. And I said, I can't wait 5 years. I can't raise a kid here. And he said, I understand. Just keep us in mind down the road. And so, long story short, I had went to Pino's Palette. It was not a franchise at the time. Does anyone know what Pino's Palette is here? Okay, there's a few of you. We walk you step by step through a full campus painting, sip libations, and listen to fun music. And so it's for people who've never paid. And I was one of those people. I remember my inspection company came to Houston to take us as a thank you. And I remember as everyone was leaving to go to Pino's, I said, I think I'm gonna skip. I don't know how to paint. I don't want y'all to waste money on me. And they were like, no, it's for people who've never painted. And we drink wine. And I'm like, I'm really good at that. I'll go. So we went and I had fun. It never dawned on me to think of buying it. I just went for fun. And anyways, I went several times with some girlfriends, and one of them one night was like, you know, you've been wanting to move home and you love Pino's, even though you're not an artist, you're pretty awful at it. But you know, what if you bought a franchise? I just wanted to start a franchising. Well, I had drank just enough wine in that class that I got on my iPhone and I applied for the franchise while I was sitting in the class. Yeah, that face, because I forgot that I did it. I'm telling you all a story I don't share very often. And so a few weeks later, I'm still at ConocoPhillips and I'm wrapping up my career there, and I get this call, and this gentleman's like, hey, this is Charles Knowles from Pino's Palette, and you applied for our franchise. I was in a board meeting, it was a Houston number, and I thought it was somebody calling from the other campus. And I was like, I have to call you. So I got off the phone with him, did the board meeting, and then later on I called him and said, man, I gotta tell you a funny story. I actually applied for that while I was drinking in class, and he was like, perfect, I'll send you a packet. I'm like, what's happening? So I remember when I told my husband, I think I'm gonna buy a paint and sip franchise. He just looked at me and he goes, have you been drinking? And I was like, no, I don't even drink that much, but I applied for it and they sent me the information and I kind of want to look at this. So I created a performa in Excel and did all the sales stuff and researched supplies and all the things. And I'm like, I think I can make this work. It took a lot of convincing. In fact, it took 7 months for me to convince my husband to do it. So one night I finally took him to Pino's in Houston and we walked in and he was just like, I thought this was gonna be like old ladies and hats and classical music. And I said, no, they're like, I'm listening to AC/DC and we're drinking Guinness. And so anyways, we about halfway through the class, he looks at me and he says, put your paintbrush down. And you know when somebody says something and you feel this overwhelming reaction of like, holy crap, he's telling me he's leaving me, he's telling me he's having an affair. Like there was something like my hair stood up just because of the way he said it, and something wasn't. And I looked at him and he goes, no offense, this is the best date I've ever been on, whether it was before you, or with you. We're buying this movie in Tulsa. And I was like, hell yeah, we are. Yeah. It's like, Jesus, why are you doing work? You know, we were like, you are gonna leave me? He goes, why don't you do that? I'm like, I don't know. Like, the tone of your voice scared me. And so anyways, we fast forward a few months, and so we moved to Tulsa, and we get open on Cherry Street. I say we get open. Funny story. So another funny God moment. I find this area on 15th Street, which is a really cool area. It's trendy, called Cherry Street in Tulsa. And the building we were going in has 3 businesses. Chipotle's on this end, in this empty spot, and then it used to be Salada, which is now it's a spot now. So we're going to go right in between them. So I have spent our life savings to get the build out done, buy the franchise, do all the things, and the city calls and says, you can't open. And I'm like, what? And they said, well, the building in the block is not zoned for a bar. You're not really a bar. We don't know what to call you in the coding of the city. And I'm like, okay, we'll figure something out. And they go, well, you're not really a bar and you're not a restaurant. So there's these weird laws that you can't just sell alcohol just to sell alcohol. What's happening? So they decided to put us in the adult entertainment category. Oh yes. So then I had to postpone our opening months because I had to get on the docket with City Hall to have the entire city block zoned for me to open as an adult entertainment venue. And not only that, they had to put a sign, because I thought I could post a sign out front so anyone in the community wants to argue with it, they can. So I took my elderly father with me to the night of the hearing, and there was people there to picket that I was opening a strip club next to Chipotle. And so, you can't make this stuff up. And I had to get up in front of the city councilors and all these people and hold a painting of a flower and be like, this is what we're doing. There will be no stripper poles and no high heels on stage. And so the city people laughed, and they were like, yelling at the people that were saying I was trying to open up a front of an art studio so I could close it. And since the building would be zoned, then I could open up the strip club. Looking at my elderly father like, Dad, this is not true. And so anyways, we overcame that hurdle. And then the week before we opened, which was months later, and I'm already paying rent and I don't have money coming in, the city calls again and they said, by the way, there's a law. You can't have a bar within 300 feet of another bar. And I'm like, I mean, we're all adults. If somebody's gonna drink, they're gonna drink whether it's there or here or home or whatever. And they said, well, so I remember I was at the store and I walked out the front door and I looked and I'm like, there's Panera, there's Chipotle, there's Salada, there's Andalini's, and I'm looking and I'm like, there's no bar. And they said, there's a bar across the street and down that has 8 seats in it, and it's called Drake's Tavern. It's this little hole in the wall. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. So I had to stop, pay a survey company to come out. They were 303 feet from my front door. Yes, you all, I was so covered and I did not sleep for a week. Because I'm like, I just spent my life savings on something I can't even do. So anyways, we get open. And it was definitely a challenge. We were doing really well, and my goal was to open, maybe 5 years later, another location. And I get a call 9 months after we opened from the president of Pinos Palette. He said, hey, we thinking you need to open a second location. Like, I don't have the money to do that. I'm still trying to pay off everything, and it's gonna take me years to do that. And he was like, okay, so we get off the phone. I didn't think anything of it. So a few nights later, I'm working a class with my staff, and one of my artists, she's across the room, and I see her behind the bar, and I'm looking out, and I see her kind of look at this guy, and she gets her finger up and waves at him, and puts her hands on her hips, and I can tell she's giving him the business. And I thought, oh God, what's happening here? So she stomps back around behind the bar, and I said, what happened? And she said, that jerk, jerk, because that's not what she said. That guy said that he was opening a Pino's Palette in South Tulsa, and that he can't wait to hire all of us away from you, beat you in sales, and shut you down. And she said, nobody messes with my paycheck. I'm a single mom. Nobody messes with my paycheck. So somebody coming at me like that, I take it personally. And I want to defend you. So at 11 o'clock that night, I called the president of Pino's Palette, because I have a cell phone, and called and woke him up. And I said, you cannot sell a franchise to somebody like that. We're supposed to be on the same team. We're supposed to be here to lift each other up. That's not the kind of person I want in my business. And that's not the kind of person I want in a community running a business. And he said, well, you didn't sign an area agreement because you couldn't afford it. So legally, anything over 5 miles away, we can sell to anybody. And I said, give me 24 hours. So I went, so when I got home, I woke my husband up and I said, we have to buy a second franchise tomorrow. And he looked at me and goes, no, and rolled over, went back to sleep. And I set up and cried, went through bank accounts, and then we had no money. And anyways, fast forward, I'm trying to figure out what to do. I called 9 banks. They all told me no. 2 of them laughed at me and hung up the phone on me. And I'm just like, I don't even know what to do. So I happened to call my father and cried like a little schoolgirl, even though I was in my late 30s. And I cried and said, Dad, no one will give me money. No one gets it. They don't understand. I don't know what to do. And my dad goes, well, why don't you call this credit union? I'm on the board there. And he's like, you're on the board of a credit union? I don't know that. I love my parents. And I said, okay. So I happened to call Red Crown Federal Credit Union. And this gentleman answers the phone. And I said, I am desperate to talk to somebody who will actually talk to him today. I need an answer today. I'm a business owner. I need a loan. And he said, well, what do you need? I tell him, I said, I own a company called Pino's Palette. I need money to buy a second location, and I have to do it by today at 5, or some a-hole is gonna open one up in South Tulsa. It's a jerk. It's gonna ruin what I created. And I just spilled my guts to him on the phone. And he goes, you know what? I happened to take my wife to Pino's Palette last night, and we had the best date we've ever been on. We've been married for 25 years. And he said, I'll give you the money. You don't even have to fill out an application. No joke. And so, yeah, you can clap because that was a major job. And so I went in the next day, so I called the president and I said, don't sell it to him. I'll send you a check by the end of today. So I went in and got my application, got all my stuff done. And so we started our second store, which was the James River Walk. And then that took off. And so 9 months later, the same president of Pino's called me and said, where the hell is Broken Arrow, Oklahoma? This time I have the money and I'm sending you a check tomorrow. And I opened the third store. And so fast forward that, all getting that construction built out and all the things going on, I happened to go to one of my doctors for just a checkup. And he said, you know, I was looking at this is the only doctor I've ever, you fill out all that paperwork in the waiting room, and no one ever asks you about all of the stuff that they put on there. And I go, oh my God. And this guy was like, you know, I was looking at your family history. Do you know, have you been tested for the BRCA gene? And I said, no, but I just assume I have it because my mom had breast cancer twice, my mother had it 3 times. And he goes, you should probably do that while you're here. So I did swab, did all the swab stuff, sent it off. I forgot about it. 5 weeks later, I'm getting open on our third store. I'm working 18-hour days. We have a little one. I'm stressed, and I get a letter in the mail that says, you have BRCA1 gene. We recommend you getting a preventative double mastectomy as soon as possible, meeting with the breast surgeon, meeting with the geneticist, and I was just like, really? And my husband comes from the superhuman gene pool of no one dying except of old age or emphysema from smoking 6 packs of Pall Malls. And so, anyways, you all laugh. And so, anyways, I said, maybe we should look at doing this. And he's like, I think it's, it's your body, but I feel like that's, you do all the things. You do your mammograms, you get your screening, you do all the things you're supposed to. Like, isn't that a little bit of overkill? And I said, no, let's just go meet with the geneticist. So we did. And the first thing he said to me is, you are a ticking time bomb. You have a 94% chance of getting breast cancer by your 40th birthday. And I was 39. And I was like, I worked in the trade floor. I'm not that great with numbers, but that's pretty substantial. So my husband was like, "Ooh, that's a lot." So made an appointment with the breast surgeon and just said, is this overkill? Is he being, overly protective of me? And she said, if I'm looking at your chart, I would schedule you for preventative double mastectomy tomorrow. And I said, okay, I used to work for a surgeon. I'm going to ask you a really hard question. Do you have any kids? And she said, actually, I have a 13-year-old daughter. I said, if this was her chart, what would you do? She slammed it shut and she said, you're going to walk straight down and you're going to book your surgery. And I said, okay, that's what we're going to do. So I booked my surgery. I had an MRI, had my ultrasound, did all the stuff. And I knew I was getting the store open in Broken Arrow, my last store. I was going to get it open on a Thursday. And then 2 weeks later, I was going to have a preventative double mastectomy. Did all the things. And the week before my surgery, I told my husband, I said, my scans were clear. Maybe we should postpone it until, 6 months. Find me some time, make sure the staff's ready, do all the things. And he was like, no, I've already taken off work. Your staff's already prepared for you to be gone. Let's just get it done. It's never going to be the right time. Funny enough, that saved my life. So I went in the following week on a Monday for my preventative double mastectomy. And Thursday, I get a call from the surgeon. And she said, hey, don't forget, tomorrow is your post-op. You're going to come in, I'm going to take your bandages off, we're going to look at you. I remember where I was at, sitting on the couch with all my drains and all my arm stuff. My husband was sitting here, our son was at daycare for the day, and my best friend stopped by to cook lunch. And she was sitting on the other couch. And I went, wait a second, why are you calling me? And she said, well, you have your post-op tomorrow, and I just wanted to let you know. And I said, no, I used to work for a surgeon. Nurses call patients, doctors don't call patients. And she said, well, I'm going to tell you a quick story. You are a freaking miracle. She said, we never saw anything in scans, we still can't find it. But in surgery, I accidentally marked in this biohazard bag tissue. They put them in those biohazard bags and they usually just dispose of them. And she said, I accidentally marked, sent it to the lab to be checked. And some kid making $8 an hour pulled one sample out of this massive bag of tissue, put it underneath the microscope. In that sample was an intact tumor of the deadliest, fastest growing breast cancer. And if you would have postponed your surgery even 2 months, you probably wouldn't be here. And I was like, what? And she said, yeah, so tomorrow come with all the questions, be prepared. And I was just like, holy crap. So I got the phone, and I remember my husband was like, what's wrong? And I said, I have breast cancer. So anyways, we went the next day. She was like, you're a freaking miracle. And she's like, you kind of did everything in the backwards order. And I said, well, let me tell you, my mom is my guardian angel, and my mom is a tough rock. She was also really funny sense of humor. It was pretty wicked. And I said, I can see her being up in heaven and going, no, listen, God, if this is my daughter's book that she has to go through all these chapters to live through, and she's going to have breast cancer, this is what's going to happen. She's going to go through the hard part of having a double mastectomy. But you're going to throw in the cancer, and then you accidentally get it in surgery, and then I'll know that she can survive chemo because I did twice, she'll be able to do it. And I remember saying that to the surgeon, and my husband looked at me and he goes, what is happening? And I'm like, no, I said, you weren't raised by my mom. I said, I know you got to know my mom before she passed and you love her dearly, but that's my mom. And I said, she has my back and all the things. And so anyways, had reconstruction. I went through 6 months of chemo, survived it. That was horrible. I don't recommend that to anybody. And so if there's a lesson in all of that, don't miss your mammograms, check yourselves, all the things. And so, in the middle of all that, I opened 3 stores, had breast cancer, won all those awards, became Businesswoman of the Year. And that's not to toot my own horn. It's just to show you all that if you believe in yourself, you get up every morning, you try to do the best, you try to be a good human, and you also laugh at yourself. Because I have a lot of moments of laughter of making fun of myself in really uncomfortable situations, like people protesting thinking I'm opening a strip club next to Chipotle. Those are the kind of moments that make you who you are. And I could have just been devastated or thought, oh my gosh, throw in the towel, but I'm gonna lose everything I spent my money on to open stores. Instead, I laughed and was like, maybe we should put a poll on stage for the grand opening night for finance. I don't know if I stopped studying the name. But anyways, I realized I have talked way too long. But I just wanted to tell you all my story because it's important. I know every one of you in this room somehow resonates with something I have shared. We've all sat next to the copy machine. We've all worked for men. We've always all been told at least once we can't do something. Or we had a dream to do something and we questioned ourselves. And then we were like, I'm gonna try it anyways, nothing to lose. And then you tried it and actually won. And so, we still have struggles. COVID almost took us out at Pino's, but we pivoted. And we 24 hours, this is crazy. One of the reasons why I love being in a franchise is I have a group of a lot of women who own franchises at Pino's across the nation. We have a chat group. We all jumped in and we're like, what are we gonna do? All of us are shutting down and we won't be able to make it because all of our landlords want our rent. And I have $22,000 a month in rent, just to rent rooms. Think of all the money I can save and pay off bills. So anyways, we pivoted and we all put our heads together. And one of them said, well, what if we just started like Zooming classes where no one's in the studio with us? We pay our staff, so they're getting paid, show up and they stand on stage and we do these. And I'm like, well, I happen to have a lot of supplies. What if we film tutorials and then we sold those Zoom links and we give everybody like to-go kits, paintbrushes and stuff. And we sold enough paint kits that first week COVID shut down. And I will say we were lucky that it was spring break because all those parents were gonna be home with their kids. And I knew right then I needed to market to those parents who were gonna be stuck with their kids at home and were panicked because all their vacations got canceled. And I said, you need something for your kids to do for 2 hours? Buy a paint kit. And we sold enough to pay for rent for 2 months in 1 week. And so, but it wasn't just me, it was a group of women putting our heads together and saying, how do we survive? How do we make this work? And so, we have to lean on each other. And I always say, you're just as good as the people that you have as around as your friends and the people who also lift you up. And anyways, I'd love to do Q&A if any of you have questions. I don't want to keep you all longer than you need to be, but I'd love to do Q&A. I'm so grateful that you all were here to hear my story. I hope it was a little bit entertaining. It's always a little bit funny and a little bit serious because that's life. But anyways, does anyone have any questions for me about business or being a mom or Pino's or anything? Not to put everybody on the spot.
How old is that?
He is 12. Who asked that? Oh, you. I was like, I heard it from over here. He's 12. He'll be a teenager in September, and he's this tall, which is funny because I'm so short. Yeah, and that was an interesting thing when I lost all my hair. What I did is right before I knew it was going to fall out, I thought, I don't want this to scare my son. It's a lot to take on. So I dyed my hair purple, which I've never done before. And I thought it was my mom's favorite color, and I was channeling her to be with me. So I dyed my hair purple before it fell out. And then when it did fall out, I would wear beanies every day because it was kind of going into the winter months. And when I would show up at his little preschool, I would tell the kids, because they were pretty little, and I could tell some of the parents didn't know what to say to me, and then I could tell they didn't know if it was going to make their kids uncomfortable. So what I did is I always wore stocking caps, and they thought I just had my hair tucked in there. And then one day I showed up at lunch and I said, you guys, guess what? And the little kids were like, what? And I brought Oreos and snacks. And so of course you feed little kids food and they love you. And I said, guess what? I cut all my hair off today. And they were like, let's see it. And I said, you ready? And I made a big thing and I did a countdown. Pulled my cap off and they all squealed and clapped. And one of them goes, you look like my dad. And I was like, and so it was really funny. And so I made this thing that wasn't scary to them or just like, not talking about it. And so I did what we call a hair check with them every week on Friday. I would go pick Keaton up from school and little daycare. And I would always have my beanie on and say, let's see if it's come back yet. I'd pull it off and they'd all, touch it and giggle. And so we did that. So it started coming in. And so that way they got to see the process of it coming back in. And it wasn't like they didn't think anything of it. And so anyways, thank you for asking. And I know you didn't ask for that question, but for that long answer, but anyways, I forgot all about that. It was a good memory. Yes.
Question, since I deal with training on kids, what do you look for when you hire somebody?
That's a great
You have to prepare people.
question. I'm kind of probably not the mold. So I use a company called People's Perspective, and they're an incredible, I think Christy spoke yesterday, right? Right. She's amazing, and that company's great. They kind of coach me through stuff, but I kind of look for people that are obviously outgoing, and I ask a couple of unique questions. So I always do a phone interview first, and I always say, what do you know about Pinot's palette? And if somebody's like, I mean, I just assume you paint. Say you haven't researched the company to know what we do, they don't make it past that. But that's also me. I want people that are prepared. And then I always ask people, what do you do in your spare time? I think it's very telling. And this is a funny example. I had a gentleman who was a very well-known artist. So a lot of the artists that work for us are professional artists outside of Pinot's. They just come to Pinot's because most artists paint by themselves in their homes or studios. So they're very quiet. And when they come to Pinot's, they use it for their social outlet. And so this one gentleman, he's a phenomenal artist. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, he works for you. That's just such a big deal. And in the interview, I said, what do you do in your spare time? And he was like, oh, I hate people. I stay in my apartment, I shut the blinds, I don't talk to anybody. I keep everything dark. And he's like, I just sit there and play video games until I have to get out. And I was like, you do realize that we have like mostly women that are squealing and drinking alcohol at night at stores. And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, probably not a good fit. So I always like to ask people what they do in their spare time, but I always like to see if they researched us. I always like to ask them questions. Tell me what was the favorite thing about your, one of your previous jobs, and what did you love about it? What are your strengths? What's your weaknesses? And I'm always surprised. I interviewed 7 people this week, and I had 2 people be very honest with me. I said, tell me what your weaknesses are. And one of them said, I have RBF. A lot of people misread me, and they don't know what RBF is. Rest in the face. So we all have that friend that they're always like, yeah. And she said, I have RBF, and so a lot of people think I'm mean. She's like, I have a really big heart. And she said, but I got fired from my last 2 jobs because people misread me. And just by asking questions about like what she liked doing and all those things, I said, you're hired. And she was like, really? And I said, yeah, because you were honest with me. And I think we can work with you through that. And I think this allows you to have that space of telling jokes, even if you have RBF base. Telling you jokes sometimes with RBF is like nailing the punchline. I was like, I don't know if that answered your questions, but I just really like getting to know people's personalities. Yeah. Does anyone else have questions? Lisa?
So thankful to have everyone here with us today, and a big thanks to our sponsors again. And my name is April Jones, and I'm with Muskogee Creek Nation Casino, the week sponsor. And I'm saying a lot. Thank you all for attending this year's conference. It surely has been an amazing one. Thank you to everyone who attended both virtually and in person. And everybody ready for some prizes? Our prizes. I guess all the committee members are coming this year. We have several baskets, presentations,